What's poppin', y'all? Offset has made it onto everyone's radar after his recent album sales came back, reported not even hitting the top 200 of Billboard, which means that it would likely sell underneath 8K units first week. And a bunch of people were coming out about this. I think it was Barty Gang, Cardi B's fan base, that were the first to really attack him for this. And then people just followed up, and his project was called Haunted by Fame. Now, there is a lot to address here, but the thing that Offset said after this was that he said, "Mixtape to get out my deal. LOL." And I'm inclined to believe that. And I think there's a lot more. Like, you guys, album sales largely are not, how do you say, they're not the same as they once were. And I'll give you the perfect example, which is Cardi B. Cardi B dropped her album. It sold a lot first week. What was it, like 200 and something thousand? Who do you know that's listening to Cardi B's album? Who do you know that's listening to a song off of there? Like, Cardi B's album came and went. I'm not going to say it's a flop, but it came and went. So an album that sold that much, it should have more staying power than that, right? Especially by a superstar. We can agree that Cardi B is a superstar, maybe not musically as we're seeing right now, but even on the charts, Cardi B, she's got one song on there with Kalani, that Safe song. So it seems like, yeah, that song's doing well, but all the other songs, like Outside, that was supposed to be like a hit, that's really not competing. And she's not in the top 40. She's at number 59, which I do think is, for rap in the current landscape of things, not the current landscape of hip hop, but hip hop standing in the landscape of commercial acts right now, that's not a bad position, 59. But this is Cardi B that we're talking about. So Cardi B's album came and went. People aren't really talking about it. I don't even think her fans are not even speaking as loudly about it for it to still have any relevance. So this album was almost DOA, almost dead on arrival. Offset, on the other hand, dropped his project before this one, Kiari. So this is the second project that Offset dropped within a couple of months, August 22nd. And Kiari performed quite well. And this is where you got to start asking yourselves, yo, what's going on here? And this was, I think they both helped each other's rollout, Offset and Cardi B. There was kind of this like conflict during their rollout. And for the album, Kiari, the first week sales of that one did like 29K, 30K, which, let's keep in mind, people are glazing off, not Offset, Lil Herb right now for doing 22K, which we're going to address a little bit later. But Offset, for his album that he put in work, it did 29, 30,000. And I think that's good. That's solid. Like, do you guys agree? Disagree there? Like 30K? Because the Migos, Culture 3, I think did 36K or something like that. And album sales have changed a lot over the past 6 years. So we can agree that Offset did very well on that project. Correct? Right? He had that Body song that really performed well. I think it performed less than it should for the impact that it had and for how great of a song it was. And with JID too, who's been having a great year. He's even got a Grammy nomination. So for Offset to drop something a month or two later, well, not a month or two later, the album Kiari dropped at the end of August. So it's been 2 months. Or let's say a month, because Haunted by Fame came out on October 31st. So 2 months. And this album did less than 8K. So he's right that now I didn't know if this was the end of his deal because he's on Motown. Now the thing is, when he was on Set It Off, that was Motown as well. But he was in a deal with QC that I think was distributed. QC had a partnership with Motown Records, and that's where the albums would come out underneath. Like, you could see his old project, Father of Four, which was his first solo project, that was quality control to Motown UMG. But I'm guessing he got out of the deal with QC, which caused some conflict between Unk and Few, which is Unk and Nephew, that was Takeoff, and Quavo's duo that they got started on. So after that, for example, like Set It Off, for Kiari, and for Haunted by Fame, those were all underneath Motown. So for him, if he's actually getting out of his deal with this one, it makes sense, because why would Motown Records offer to market his album when it's his last project and he's going to leave and go somewhere else? So it's not like they can carry over the marketing expenses that they incurred on Haunted by Fame and then move it to the next project that Offset is set to give them. And this also happened to Youngboy before he got out of his deal. Before Youngboy had, I think it was when he was on Atlantic, his last project on Atlantic did not sell well. This was Lost Files, which was a bunch of songs that were put together, but it did like 18,000 or something like that. That was the last project that was distributed by Atlantic Records. That was a solo project by Youngboy, because when he's doing a tape or a mixtape or a duo project with somebody from his label NBA is still with Atlantic. I think so. So those, because he did one with Quando Rondo after that. So that project did not perform that well because they were like, hey, why would we even promote this? And that was lower than Youngboy, who was doing like 100K plus. Like, for example, the last Slimito, that one did like 108K, and that was released the same year as Lost Files. So they were like, hey, we're not spending marketing on this guy. And you see how far the sales drop when that's the case. So I think that is an example for Offset. None of us really heard about this project with Offset because it was probably just dropped via him. There was zero marketing budget put into it. So a lot of people will say like, oh man, this, like, they're just taking it out of context. Like if you have a mixtape by Offset that only mentioned it on his own social media, no pages really posted about it like that. Nobody really talked about it like that. A lot of people didn't react to it. There wasn't marketing budget put behind it. And it's the last project and he plans on going independent or going to a different label, different distributor, whatever the case is. Why would you ever expect the project to do anywhere near as good as his last one? Even if it was just another album that he was putting out, he just put out an album in August, which there was a lot of effort put behind that album and the music videos. You should check them out. The music videos for Kiari, if you haven't, they're well-produced music videos. So even if it was the case that he dropped another album, it would likely sell less than Kiari anyway, because the album just dropped 2 months ago. So for him to drop 2 months later, I will give it to him like, yeah, this is a mixtape. It's just a commercial mixtape, which is what mixtapes have become. But it's not a cope. It's not a cope tape, which is what a lot of rappers have done in the past, which is like, hey, this is their only project of the year. And they're saying, nah, this is actually a mixtape. Like, come on, dog. What are we doing here? Like, mixtape's supposed to be something that you just throw out there, which is kind of like a compilation of tracks. And that's what Offset did here. But I'm interested to see what Offset does next. Like, for example, Meek Mill, when he went independent and left his deal, he hasn't had a song or a project really, really crack and do a lot of numbers, but it is performing well within Meek's fan base. Like, for example, I'm a Meek Mill listener. So the music that Meek Mill has dropped has been solid. Now, I will say the project did decent commercially was the one that he dropped with Rick Ross. That was a solid one. Too Good to Be True. Since then, he hasn't dropped a full-on album. That project did well, but I think that one is on, what was it, Gamma? I think it was Gamma via whatever. But since then, he's done a couple of different EPs, which he's dropping good music, but nothing's really, really catching like that. He had that song Proud of Me with Friday that he was featured on. So that wasn't really him, but he had this one tape or mixtape EP. It was a short 4-track thing called Who Decides War last year in 2024. And he had 5 a.m. in Philly, which was a song that did very, very well. That one's got like 14 million streams, and that's off the strength. As in, he just distributed that himself. It's like Dream Chasers. And he just dropped the song and people messed with it so heavy that they kept listening to it, which is very, very impressive. Like, Meek Mill's operation right now is, how do you say? It's like, well, 5 a.m. in Philly was a single that they just ended up putting on like 3 separate EPs or bundles, just so I guess like the EPs perform better. But that's an example of somebody getting it off the muscle. Like, he also had a song Heathenism. No, on his project Heathenism, he had a song with Future. I forgot the name of that one. That one did okay too, but that's a feature. So the solo song that Meek Mill had, 14 million streams, that's no joke. That's nothing to scoff at. But we're not judging Meek Mill. Well, Meek Mill hasn't dropped his solo album since freaking Championships, dude. No, Expensive Pain, excuse me. That blue, like, Miami looking cover. I don't know why that cover just reminds me of Miami. And Sharing Locations was a big hit on that, but that was like peak Dirk, baby. And that was 2021. So we haven't gotten an album from Meek in 4 years. Solo album from Meek, going on 5 years. I don't know if we will get one. I don't know if that's his priority right now. But if Meek Mill were to just randomly drop, there would probably be a lot of anticipation because, hey, this guy hasn't dropped an album in a long time. But there's no way you're going to expect it to do the same amount that it did with Too Good to Be True, which was the project that he had with Rick Ross. So I think people are just trying to pick on Offset. I think a lot of context doesn't get looked at when it comes to album sales. People are just like, oh, this guy, this is a flop. Dog, he just sold 30K like 2 months ago at the end of summer. Like, are you already forgetting that? Or did you just not even listen to that project or even pay attention to what that project did either? And it's always an opportunity. It's going to be a good headline, of course, but I don't think we can agree that Offset is cold. Like, Offset is popping right now, and he's dropping good music, and he's consistent. So I don't think the numbers tell the whole story. And like I said in previous videos, I think the most important thing right now is the longevity of a project more so than what it does. Like, are people still listening to songs and the mixtape or album itself in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 8 weeks? That tells a better story than the first week, which in the case of Young Thug and Cardi B, their projects came and went. So they had decent first weeks. Well, he did less than Gunna. But for example, like numbers wise, it wasn't bad. It wasn't terrible for Young Thug. But it is terrible because nobody's listening to it anymore. And that's what matters more. But let me know what y'all think about this in the comments. Like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell if you enjoyed. Do you think Offset will go independent now? I don't know. Being independent is not easy. It's very hard. Let me know in the comments. And I'm going to see you on the next one.